So, Sri Akal, my name's Amma. Welcome to my podcast, Amma Brown Girl. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about alcoholic uncles as well as my relationship with alcohol as a South Asian woman. Now, this is a topic I've wanted to talk about for such a long time because I feel like it hasn't got the coverage that it needs, hence why I'm talking about it. But to begin with, growing up, I was always surrounded by alcohol, alcoholics, and uncles who by the morning would preach about being a good Sikh man and talking about praying. By the afternoon, they'd be talking about Modi and the never-ending politics. And by the evening, they'd have a cheeky ek do peg to digest the day. Peg is a word that my dad would use for a bit of JD or Jack Daniels. And he would mix it with ice and water because he's diabetic, so he can't use fizzy drinks. Loving the health consciousness despite him being a raging alcoholic at certain points in his life. Based off my experience, there's a real issue with alcoholism within the South Asian community. And it's heavily celebrated, which at one point I thought, oh, it's just what men do and it's their uncle's thing. But when you really look at it for what it is, there are a lot of people, especially the men in our community, who have crippling alcohol issues that they're either in denial about or continue living that lifestyle of drinking or annoyingly make it their entire personality. Even through music, television, film, there is so much about alcohol being celebrated, and you'll usually see the wife being annoyed or frustrated about their husband's drinking and the issues they come with. Luckily, we do have some Punjabi bangers as a result of it, but it's clear to say that the issue is celebrated. Within my own family, I can name multiple alcoholics who are currently struggling with it or even died as a result. We don't believe in getting help or being honest with ourselves or seeking support or even being honest with our mental health. There's not enough of a strong support system that advocates against drinking alcohol, but instead the community is built more upon guilt and shame. I always saw my dad drinking after work, and he doesn't drink as much, but I know that it made me feel quite uncomfortable. Anytime he was with friends, anytime we'd go on holiday, or if there was an event, alcohol would always be there at any given point or excuse to drink, he would drink. And to be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a drink. It can be quite enjoyable, but at the same time, too much of anything is not good for you. Having an addiction is far from the actual addiction itself, but more about the pain to pleasure balance. If addiction on any spectrum is something that you struggle with, may it be sex, porn, alcohol, smoking, whatever it is for you, it's likely that your pain to pleasure balance is unbalanced. In a world of endless dopamine, being aware and introducing abstinence is the best way to begin healing. Yes, there's a few steps to it, but abstinence is a starting point. Now, before you question me on how I actually know this information, because I'd be lying if I said I was an expert, but what I can tell you is that I've read a wicked book called Dopamine Nation, and it has changed my life for the better, as well as helped me understand addiction from a professional point of view. I only recommend books to read if I think they're worth recommending, but Dopamine Nation is a New York Times bestseller. It's written by Dr. Anna Lembke, and she talks about how pain and pleasure are in the same part of your brain. And some of the things you can do to rebalance the scale is taking cold showers, going for a run, lifting weights at the gym, because they're somewhat painful, but you experience the pleasure afterwards. She talks about relying less on cheap dopamine hits and how you can actually have more healthy self-control. So if that's something that interests you, I'll put it in my caption for you to take a look. But I would recommend everyone to read that book because it helps you understand dopamine, pain and pleasure balances, addiction on a whole new level. And I feel like it's opened my mind up to being more understanding. Now, back to Sharabi or alcoholic dads and uncles. I can definitely see how me talking about this topic is from a place of privilege because I've made an effort to read about it. And I know there's no way I could get my dad to read this book. But what it's made me realize is that the same way we use dopamine to blow off some steam from the stresses of life, it's the same way our dads and uncles use alcohol to soothe themselves. Is alcohol a great option? No. Am I more understanding? Yes. Since drinking is often a social event, especially within our community, it's a way people connect. But the issue we have here is the continuous generation of alcoholics. I've even seen scenarios where when people are looking to get married, if the guy drinks, it's an issue, but a tolerable issue, because that's just what men do and you can't change them. As long as they're not aggressive, it's fine. But if the man doesn't drink, it's seen as a catch. And I think that's fascinating because for me personally, I'd like to think that people would want to be with someone who's not an alcoholic in general. When I was younger, I remember seeing aunties who were drinking at a party for the first time, and I just remember being so taken back and so gobsmacked just to see that and be like, wow, women actually drink, this is insane. It was literally ingrained into my brain to think that women who drink are wannabe white women and that they're bad, which of course is not true. But I was so judgmental because that's the way I was conditioned to think about women who drink within our community. The point I'm struggling with is that there's no issue with drinking if that's what you want to do and that's your choice. But no one is talking about the crippling alcohol addiction within our community. How it makes wives feel, how it makes families feel, how it makes children feel. The lack of support or even wanting to seek support. And more importantly, the health effects it has on yourself. If we openly talked about it, there'd be less alcoholics within our community who'd feel more supported and understood that they're not alone, that this is a conversation that needs to be had, that drinking at any given point or any excuse is not okay, and perhaps they might need some help. Since we all know the Asian community find it hard to seek help from the white man, which again I understand because seeking help can be scary. But acknowledging the issue would be a great first step, or at least understanding if it's something you can manage yourself. If you feel like you need the support, luckily there's numerous avenues out there that do provide that support, such as Alcoholics Anonymous, who have a 12-step program that help tackle alcohol addiction. There's online platforms like Drink Aware and Alcohol Change UK, and numerous helplines like National Alcohol Helpline. There's also Drinkline and the Addiction Helpline as well. Again, seeking help can be hard, but the one thing I love about being South Asian is the community. Sure, we have a long list of issues, but we have a million reasons that I absolutely love about our culture and community, and one of my favorite being unity. If we talk about our issues more and acknowledge them, it would be beneficial to come together and support one another. Having a positive support system over ones built on guilt and shame help with managing addiction of any kind a lot better, and the likelihood of relapsing is a lot lower. Over recent times, I've seen the rise of people becoming sober, or even the sober curious community, especially within my age group being the early 20s, mid 20s. And I'm definitely one of them. So I'd love to talk about my story of how and why I stopped drinking. Firstly, the stigma around South Asian women drinking over men is wild. Women are looked down at for drinking, they're judged, it's a very secret thing, and I was definitely judged for it by my relatives. By the time I was 21, surprisingly, my parents were quite chill about me drinking, but it was only within the house, not in front of the relatives. Anyways, I've painted the picture of how I hated seeing my dad drink when I was younger. I hated how anxious I was and how uncomfortable I felt around people who were drinking, especially the men, being my uncles. And I even remember this one point where I had to clean up after my dad because he'd drunk too much, and that was not fun. Oh, and the one thing I absolutely regret is being the passenger of a drunk driver. Despite my poor dating choices of dating guys who would drink and joyride in their fancy sports cars, thinking back, I was really putting my life on the line. At the time, I obviously thought, oh my God, I'm living my best life. I'm living up my passenger princess life. But in reality, that was so dangerous. So now that's something I would never do. And I can't stress enough how dangerous it is to drink and drive, hence why I really appreciate safe drivers. So anyways, I hadn't really started drinking until I was 19. So that was probably around the end of my second, going into my third year of uni. I had drank a little bit when I was younger, so like maybe 13 or 14, but that was solely for the purposes of looking cool. There was a bottle of peach schnapps in the fridge and my mom was like, did you drink it? And I was like, no, I would never do that. And then like she called my dad and I remember I'd filled it with water. So they obviously drank it and they were like, this tastes not right. And they were questioning me. And then they interrogated my brother. They interrogated me. And I was like, it wasn't me. But all along, it was definitely me. Sorry, mom and dad. I'd say around the time when I was 20, 21, I was drinking. I had a friend circle where alcohol was very present. I was going on lots of dates where there was alcohol. And to be clear, I was never an alcoholic. It was something that I did enjoy at the time. But I found myself doing it based off the certain point I was in my life and the people I surrounded myself with. It wasn't until just before my 24th birthday that every time I would drink, my body was starting to reject alcohol. Anytime I would have a sip, I would instantly feel quite sick. I'd feel really bloated, really heavy, and I just started to drink less and less. But on my 24th birthday, when I tell you I drank like there was no tomorrow, I was having cocktails upon cocktails. Best birthday ever, no regrets, but it was to the point I blacked out. Luckily, I had my darling girlfriend take care of me. She took me home, cleaned me up, got me into bed. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night looking at my fire alarm because I have a fire alarm just on top of, well, somewhere there if you can see. And it has a small little green light. And I remember waking up and it was looking so wavy. It was going left, it was going right. And I just knew like, nah, I've drank way too much. And at that point, I was finished. After my 24th birthday, I swore I would never want to feel like that ever again. And I haven't been drunk since. I wanted to stop drinking for a long time, even before that, but it was just because the friends I had at the time, I felt like I was missing out. And just some of the events I'd go to as well, I was like, well, I'm here now, I might as well drink. So it was definitely a lot of fear of missing out. But the actual main reasons why I stopped drinking was, number one, every time I drank after a certain point, I just felt like shit. And the hangover was so exhausting to come back from. And number two, which wasn't the initial reason why I stopped drinking, but definitely a benefit of, was the fact that it was just so expensive. It got to the point where I literally could not afford to drink. I was spending stupid amounts of money on alcohol, which I don't regret because I had a good time. But at the same time, I'm brown and I love a bargain, and I cannot warrant spending £15 on a drink when I can buy a whole bottle. So for me, that's not a good bargain. So now it's coming down to just about under a year since I've stopped drinking. I feel energized, my health is thriving. I've saved so much money, obviously. And I do a lot more cooler activities that are not around alcohol, and I feel like I get to spend a lot more quality time with my friends. Generally, I just feel so much more alive and I don't have to think so much about it in the terms of having to plan in drinking. Because before, I felt like if I was going to an event and I knew I was drinking, I'd have to counter in at least a day to recover. But now, I can just go and live my life without having to think about it so much. I don't know if I'll ever drink again, but it just doesn't appeal to me in the way that it once did. This episode's almost coming to an end, and it's been interesting to say the least. I hope sharing my story gave you insight on your choice of dopamine, or maybe even reconsidering if alcohol is something that you really need. If you have any stories or experiences around alcohol or addiction, or felt like you can relate, drop me a DM and feel free to talk about it. The more we talk about it, the more awareness we have. Maybe you could have that chat with your dad or uncle who drinks a little bit too often, just to maybe check in with them, to see how they're doing, to perhaps educate them, or ask if they need any additional support. I've definitely had that chat with my dad, and I can see that he drinks far less than before. At one point, we even shared a cheeky drink together on my 24th birthday, which, as a South Asian Punjabi girl, for me was monumental. Drinking with her ex-priest, typical Punjabi Sikh dad who wears a turban, is a one-way ticket to hell. So I'm glad I could be open about it with him and not feel so judged, but I'm also glad that I don't drink anymore. Either way, I'm never going to tick all the boxes for that crusty Punjabi guy who wants the requirement of she must not drink. Anyways, this brings me to the end of this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I don't know why I'm so surprised when people message me or talk about my podcast and they're like, yeah, I listen to your podcast. Like, duh, I do put myself out there, so of course people are going to listen to it. But I still get shocked as to, wow, people actually listen, and that is such a nice feeling. And I love when people DM me about their experiences and feel comfortable enough to share. So I thank you so much for that. I appreciate if you've made it up to this point. And if you have any topics you'd like me to discuss or how I can do better with my engagement, which is something that I'm really trying to work on, let me know. Drop me a DM. I'm more than happy to take it all in. And just before I say my outro, if you haven't already done so, follow my Instagram, follow my TikTok. As I said, I'm trying to get my engagement, do all the social media stuff, all that malarkey. But I thank you for watching. I thank you for listening. Thank you. Dhanyavad. Sat Shri Akal. Bye.